For our final guest tonight, please join me in welcoming from Larian Studios CEO Sven Vinke, and from Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast, the creative director of Dungeons & Dragons, Mike Merles, to talk about Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah! Now, this was only just recently announced. How did this partnership come about?
We went to see Wizards of the Coast at the end of Divinity Original Sin 1.
Yeah.
That was back in 2014. And I tried to convince them back then that they should give us the Baldur's Gate 3 license. And they said, yeah. But we had a long chat about what the vision would be for the game. And then we kept on bumping into each other. And then suddenly in 2016, I get a phone call from Nathan Stewart, who's the big boss of Mike and the head of Dungeons & Dragons. He said, you need to come to Seattle right away. We're going to have dinner in a very shady restaurant. And he had this big stack of paper with him. And on it was Baldur's Gate 3. And in it was pretty much everything that we talked about. And he says, I'm going to present this to my board. Do you still want to do it? I said, yeah, of course I still want to do it. And then a couple of weeks later, we started negotiating. And here we are.
I mean, what does the Baldur's Gate franchise mean to you, Mike?
Oh, to me, it's the crown jewel of D&D computer games, right? I mean, for me personally, Baldur's Gate, the original one, was finally I had the chance to actually play a D&D campaign rather than having to run them for all my friends. So it means so much to us. Baldur's Gate, it's such fantastic storytelling, and it's so exciting to see it come to not only a new generation of gamers, but for the gamers who remember the 20 years it's been since the original, the first two in the series. So it's incredibly exciting. And for us, it's such an important part of the D&D mythos as a whole. And we got a chance to see the trailer. Talk to me about some of the story elements, the world elements. What are things we're going to see in Baldur's Gate 3?
Well, we're only talking about what's in the trailer right now, but obviously you're going to go to the city, because we start with the city. You start outside of the city, actually. There's going to be mind flayers. They're very nasty. You are seeing in the trailer the process of ceremorphosis, as we call it. It's accelerated, so that's not normal.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a lot of iconic creatures, iconic characters, iconic places, and that's as far as we go.
I'm curious about some of the gameplay elements, because obviously, there's just been a big resurgence of Dungeons & Dragons, tons of broadcasts on Twitch. I mean, how do you translate some of the insane things that players want to do into, what has to be a structured computer game?
So we started with the player handbook, which is basically the basic rule set of Dungeons & Dragons.
Which player handbook? Which edition?
5th edition. 5th edition.
Great. Yeah.
And so we ported as much as we could to the video game. We looked at what works really well. We looked at the things that didn't work that well, because it is a video game, and this was made for tabletop gaming. And so we started modifying those things, and then we had to add things on top of it, because if you play tabletop, you have a game master, and you say, well, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And then the game
I want to
master
start a fight with a pigeon, and he's like, okay, roll for dexterity.
Exactly, that's it. So we had to add systems to make that possible within the game. But we've gone very, very far.
Yeah, I mean, can you give an example of like a crazy moment that a player might do that you could actually play out in the game?
Well, I could, let's say that we get into a fight because you ask a nasty question, I don't want to answer it. And I take the chair over there, I put it on fire, smash it on your head. Well, just as an example.
It's just an example, this is fine, we're just talking,
These are things that we have to put systems into the game for to do it, which are not necessarily going to be described inside of the book.
Interesting. And I mean, like, Mike, in terms of your role, speaking to Larian Studios, you have tons of data of all the sorts of things that players do. What's the sort of information that you provide in assistance?
Well, really what it comes down to is providing the story support. We think of Dungeons & Dragons, the universe of D&D. It's like a toy box for dungeon masters and players to go into and build their own stories. So working with Larry and working with Sven, a lot of it was just opening up that toy box and sharing it. And giving that kind of guidance, like I remember one of our first meetings, we just laid out a map of Baldur's Gate and the Sword Coast and asking a lot of questions, like what kind of story do you want to tell? Where do we want to go? What are the cool locations we've always wanted to put into a game like this? And then in terms of the system support, what does it mean in terms of the story for each character, for each character race, each character class, so that if you have your favorite class and it's in the game, you really feel like you're taking on that role that you love so much from the tabletop. It's really coming to life in an authentic way in Baldur's Gate 3.
And we're going to talk in a moment about Baldur's Gate 3 release dates and whatnot, but we have a second game that we want to talk about on a new technology known as pencil and paper. I understand that there is a tabletop prequel coming for Baldur's Gate.
Exactly. So in Baldur's Gate, we think there's one saga, all the different games coming together to tell one grand story of this city. So on September 17th, we're releasing our next tabletop campaign, Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus. And it is the next chapter in the Baldur's Gate saga.
Right.
And it's a prequel to Baldur's Gate 3. So if you haven't played a Baldur's Gate game since Baldur's Gate 1 or 2, this is your chance to check out on the history. It's been about 100 years since the events of Baldur's Gate 2.
Yeah.
So this will give you a chance to check in on the city, to see what's going on, its current state, who the movers and shakers are. We also feature a complete levels 1 to 13 campaign that takes you from the mean streets of Baldur's Gate to the depths of hell itself. And sort of pose to the players a question: do you want to redeem Baldur's Gate or send it to damnation? So we're putting that right in players' hands to make that choice.
Well, I have to ask Sven, it's a question on a lot of people's minds. What can you talk to us about expected release timeframes?
So people have been waiting for it for a long time.
Yeah.
They're going to have to wait a little bit more when it's ready. This is the game that we want to play, so we want to make sure it's really, really good. And then when that's the case, then we'll release it.
Well, I know a lot of people have been waiting a long time. And I think I speak for a lot of people here when I say, take your time. If the Divinity Original Sin games are any indication of the quality, it's going to be fantastic and worth the wait. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me on stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ben and Mike talking about Baldur's Gate 3. Goodbye. Goodbye, guys.